All right. So the place that I want to start is with your experience as an elite athlete. You competed at the 2000 Olympics, which were in Sydney for Canada's canoe kayak team. What was that experience like?
Oh, the experience of actually competing. That's interesting. It's never about the competition for me. It's always about the leading up to, and people say the journey is what matters. And it's so true because the competition is almost a blur for me. But you know, and there's specifics I could get into, but for me, it was just the end of a journey, the end point of a journey that I'd hoped to achieve ever since I was a little girl. And so very cool for that reason. And yeah, it felt like all that work was coming together. You know, our results were not what we wanted them to be. I sure wish I won a medal, because that's always the first question everybody asks. Like, did you win a medal? But no, it was fantastic it felt almost so fast at the end. I had only started paddling 4 years before that, because I had been a swimmer.
What?
Originally.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. So it felt like a really fast series of events after spending my whole life kind of hoping for it. Yeah, which was great.
What do you think is the value of competitive sports? I mean, we live in a culture where people have a conflicted relationship with the idea of competition. I'm curious about your thoughts on the value of competition generally and the impact of competitive sports specifically for you.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with competition. I love competition. I think that it can be kind of developed in a super positive way. But in terms of elite sport or just sport in general, it's one of those few things that you have at an early age that just encourages you to experience failure over and over and over again, but in such a positive environment. You never, in sport, you're expecting to fail, so many more than you expect to win. And so you start to become resilient. You build resilience in an environment that's super supportive, right? If you have great coaches and great teammates, then it's the best way to learn that skill of resilience and to get up and try again and to realize there's always going to be another chance as long as you're willing to give it a go. And so I think for kids, having that experience early is critically important. If you don't have it, and maybe you can get it in other places, like maybe as a musician but sport to me is one of those places where it's the perfect example of how to start down that pathway. I have no problem with competition. I think that it can be unhealthy with the wrong environment around it. But given the right supports, the right coaches, the right environment, I think it's really important for young kids to experience, to build resilience.
That idea of we almost expect to fail. I think about books like The Secret and The Law of Attraction, which is like, if you think about failing, you're inviting it into your life.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how this idea of failing early, of embracing failure, of learning how to be resilient through the face of failure, how has that lesson impacted how you guide the teams that you lead today?
Yeah, I used failure in what I was saying just a minute ago, but then as you were speaking, I was realizing, I never felt like it was a failure. I might have felt like I lost, which is no fun. I hate losing.
I hate losing.
But I never once said, oh, I failed, which is interesting, right? Because that's kind of how I've carried on my business career too. Is like when something doesn't work, well, it's just a point in time that you're moving from. It's not a failure per se. It's just, okay, that didn't work. That might have been a lost cause or something that didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. And then we move on from that. Everything in my career has built off the past thing in one way or another. So maybe, maybe I should reassess that word failure and think of it more as just, whether it was the win we expected or not. And I think that's why kids probably keep going. They don't feel like they're failing. They're just taking shots.
That's so true. And feeling like you lost is a different feeling than feeling like you failed. That's so true. Losing sucks. It really does. But it's not an end destination, because you can, you've got another game coming up or another race or competition. Yeah.
And like digging into it a bit further, it's not as binary as success and failure. Like you might have lost, but you might have got a better time than you did in your last, or, you might have had a better performance. Like, so you're seeing incremental gain, even though it wasn't the win. And we do in business, especially in startup, high growth business, it is so binary. It's like, you're on this track and you better achieve these results, or it's a loss. And so many times it's not. Like so many times there's a different outcome that still could be considered a win in one way or another. And I think it's important to look at that side of it too. But we have so much ego tied up into it, and so it's hard to get past not getting to where you want it to be.
You talked about how in your career, every sort of win or every next step has been built on what has come before it. And you also talked about the importance of loss. I'm curious if you can kind of share with us an experience that you want to talk about where you lost, in business, and it actually planted the seed for something that came next.
Yeah. My first business was a shared workspace, well before shared workspaces were even a thing. And the reason I did it was I was a single mom, with 2 young kids, and I needed to make money, and I wanted to feel more legitimate than working out of my basement, which is so funny because now we all work out, right? But at the time I felt like legitimacy came with having an office. And so I thought, well, geez, maybe I should create an office and create a shared workspace with people, and we could work together and collaborate on bigger and better projects. Because I had this desire to do bigger and better things than I could do on my own. And so I saved up and I bought a building and I renovated the building and I leased equipment and got in way too far over my skis. It was a very expensive, it was all expenses, right? And I was supporting it on, very small memberships and my own graphic design consulting at the time. So it was just not sustainable. But at the time in this shared workspace, we started to build relationships with people, other creative people, relationships that I still have today, and really diverse groups of people. And I think so when that business closed, so actually, sorry. So what happened, it was I met a guy who was a member, who was a technical guy. He was a developer, an engineer, and he needed a creative person. And so we started working together. And when we started working together, I had no idea that could lead to a partnership in business. And that's exactly what happened. Is my business was struggling, but at the same time, I was having this relationship kind of grow out of what I called Queen Street Studios at the time. And we partnered and we started my first kind of real business, one that was actually profitable, which was a software development company called Norex, which ran for years. So that's a great example of, taking one thing that's not working and then just evolving it into the next.
And it's interesting because that's when I met you. Because I can remember I had a communications consulting agency and we needed graphic design. Somehow I got introduced to you. So I remember first meeting you as a graphic designer. And I think my husband, Leon, who's now my business partner, I can remember him meeting you in Dartmouth to pick up I don't know, because I think it was the proofs or something like that. It's such a long time ago, but it's so funny. And what I find interesting, I was curious about how you made that transition from being a non-technical founder to, I think people who meet you now, you are known as a successful founder in the high growth tech industry, really. What was that like? That transition from being an athlete, a graphic designer, a creative person, and making that transition into the world of technology and high growth companies. What was that like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's, it's founded in having an idea of where you want to go, a bit of a vision of where you want to go. And that could be a small vision or a big vision. And then it's about building the teams around you, because none of us can do it on our own, right? And so whether it be a team of training partners and coaches, or in this case, this was a team of engineers, because I started to see as a graphic designer that there was amazing opportunities to build things that were digital, right? This was early on in the kind of digital revolution, and in terms of web development and software development. And I wanted to get these ideas out of my head and actually into the world. I couldn't do it on my own. So the idea of building a team around me of technical people was what I needed to do. But I think I always knew that I brought something really important to the team, which was the innovative idea, the thing that was the creative aspect of what we were trying to build. And so I understood that I could be a huge contributor to this team, which is really important. Everybody needs to feel like they are contributing. And then over the years, I started to get a little bit more technical, and started to understand how to run technical teams. But yeah, if I were to look back and think, oh yeah, Julia, you're going to be leading like a software engineering company, I would have just thought, no way. In fact, a few years ago, I was awarded top 50 women in STEM, and my brother called me and he's like, Julia, you've never been good at science or math or engineering. He's like, how the hell did you pull that one off?
You're like, little bro, it's hard to be a prophet in Nazareth.
Yeah. But it's so true. It's like everybody has something to give, right? In today's world, digital is just a way to get things to market. It needs creative thinking behind it. It needs innovative thought. It needs a team of people. So yeah. So there's a place. There's a place for me.
Yeah, you can safely say. So let's talk about Norex. Was Norex the firm where you actually became Google's first ever premier partner? Was that the company that you did that through? Another example of like one thing building on the other. Yeah. So we were building websites first. And this is when Google started to want to get into being a business solutions provider. So it was mainly consumer at the time. And they were only engineering. I don't even think they had a phone number, if you wanted to call them. So and what year approximately would this have been? This would have been like 2006-ish. Yeah. And so we would have companies come to us and they'd want us to build their websites. And then they would say, can you set up our email? Because at the time, it's so strange to think that it was actually hard to set up an email. It was technical. So we would do that. And we always believed in the Google platform. And so we'd always implement Google. And after doing this for some larger clients, like we're talking clients with, thousands of employees, we thought, I think Google probably needs us. We actually thought that. And I had a business partner at the time, and he was just the best sales guy I've ever known. And he basically flew us down to Mountain View and pitched us as their partner to deploy Google Apps for Enterprise. And they bought into that, and we became their first premier partner globally. He started in North America, and we stayed that way for about a year, and then they opened it up to a small group, about six of us, and we were deploying Google for large REITs, for airlines, for universities, huge organizations, and that meant moving them from traditional email systems over to Google, and then doing the engineering to make sure that all the systems were working. So it's funny, art student. Athlete turned art student turned CEO of an enterprise email migration company. Like, again, who would have thought? But it was, that was a really interesting ride. And we got to work really closely with Google. Like, I'd fly down often to their Mountain View campus and work with their teams and understand how they would build product, how they would test it with users. And it gave me kind of my first taste of building a product company, because we were in services, and I really liked it. I was really excited about that. What were some of the core differences? Like, what were the biggest shifts that you had to make in terms of how you think as you made that switch from service to product? Well, yeah, so for the very basic one is that in a service company, you have to make sales and you have to do customer support. And in a product company, you're much more focused on engineering and product, and then growth, which can be, growth marketing and understanding your numbers. So it's just a different team. You're building a very different team, and it's not about selling, it's about serving.
your product has to serve, it has to meet the needs of the users, because you don't have a great salesperson in front of them saying, buy it, buy it, buy it. It's got to deliver on its own. So I think that the team structure, very, very different. And the fact that the product really has to be built to serve.
And when you think about being, you've been the CEO of a service-based company, you've also been the CEO of a product, based company. How did your role change? What were the shifts that you saw in how you needed to operate, and how your job as a CEO became different as you made that switch? And for listeners who are, asking, I know not a ton of people are going to make a switch from their role as CEO of service-based to product-based. But when you are looking at even creating more leverage or scale into a service-oriented business, it's very helpful to think like a product designer or somebody who's leading a product-based company. So I think, in your comments, this is what I'm hoping people are going to be taking for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing this is a really good question. I've never thought about this. So I had a moment of apprehension where I'm like, uh-oh. I don't know if I've got an answer for this. I think
teach us, Julie.
I'm just gonna go off the top of my head. What I think here was the big difference, and something that I think service companies can do way better, is the fact that in a product company, you got to really know your customer, like really know it, because you're building a product, again, to serve them, right? You can't pull the market. You can't, push your product to the market anymore, because that's not how you're building your team. You need to pull the market to you. So you have to build something that people are going to use, they're going to love, they're going to tell other people about it. And to do that, you have to get on the ground with your user. You have to watch them use it. You have to understand why they hate it, and what you can do to change that. When I started my current company, Shoelace, I spent hundreds of hours in the classroom. And it was so funny because I'd watch teachers. I had this big dream of creating a literacy technology to help kids learn how to read. And after hundreds of hours in the classroom, I realized I don't even need to develop anything beyond just a login system, because we had grade 3 teachers spending half an hour getting kids to log in. They never got to use the software, right? So we built a really innovative way for kids to log in like less than a minute. And that, was able to, that revolutionized how people were using our software compared to others. And what a simple thing, right? But if you don't know your users, you can't do that. When I was at Google, actually, once we were watching through one of those, those mirrors where you can through, they can't see
one way. I think it's one-way mirrors.
Yeah. So they had some people testing their new chat. It was a chat box that kind of popped up in your Gmail, and they'd never had that before. And they saw users sitting there, and this little chat box would pop up, and nobody knew what to do with it. It was just there on the screen, and I thought, there's a little field. They didn't even know it was a field. Like it wasn't clear to them because they weren't technical people. They were just users of email. And so after a while, they figured out that if they did a little flashing cursor at the start of the chat box, that people actually would know, oh, maybe I type here, right? And so just tiny things that can make such a massive difference.
So I'd like to dive into that experience of spending time in the classroom, spending hundreds of hours inside a classroom, because I have noticed in the work that we do that time and again, entrepreneurs will really underestimate or undervalue the primacy of spending time with customers to really understand. And it's not always something that you can or even want to outsource. Like this is sort of really good primary research that you should probably be doing yourself to develop a gut for what your business actually is, Right. So, so walk us through where that company came from, and what stage as a leader were you when you decided, hey, it's totally worth my time to spend hundreds of hours in classrooms? I'd love you to kind of walk us through that experience.
Yeah. So the company that we built to work with Google, that had been sold. And then I went back to the software development company, to Norex, that I had been in, just to figure out kind of what was next. And my business partner and I had always implemented innovation time with our staff. So we gave time for our team members to just try out kind of very just big ideas that they wanted to give a go, rather than working for clients, because working for clients can get a little bit, tough after a while, especially for creative people. So,
how much time, by the way, just to be, because listeners are going to kill me if I don't ask.
I think we tried to do the Google thing, like the 20/80 rule. And there's definitely times where that didn't work because we just had deadlines and that wasn't going to happen. But we did carve off time where they could actually focus on making projects. And one of the projects we thought was interesting was around eye tracking. And so we were doing eye tracking with some DAL students to see if there were eye patterns that were predictive of reading challenges. The idea to focus on reading came from two places. My business partner, I knew somebody who had dealt with being illiterate, and I had a son at the time who was really struggling with reading, and I was just frustrated that there wasn't something that could really help him out, especially after years of building great user-focused technology. So that's what got us started. But then this was the first product company that we had built. We got a managing partner for the software company, and we went all in as soon as we felt like we were really ready to go all in. So I guess that you could say it was incubated for a little while in our service company. And then the first thing that we started doing was just meeting with people. That's all you can do at the beginning. You just have to understand what the problem is. You have an idea of what it is, but you're wrong. You're generally wrong. We spent tons of time meeting with people. So I'm going to break this down in detail because this is so fascinating. So you have Norex, which is your service-based business, right? Where you're basically deploying Google-based apps into enterprise, right? Right? Yeah. Well, actually, the Norex was just a website software business.
That's right, website.
Then we launched Sheepdog, which was the Google business. Yeah,
right.
Out of Norex. So instead of just making it a broader service offering, we actually there was a new company spun out. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Why did you decide to do that?
It wasn't my decision. There was our business. We had a business partner who wanted to take the lead of a company, and so. He actually started it up, and then there was my other. So there's three business partners, and the two of us just decided that we wanted to move there to support that growth. We saw real opportunity in growing that company, and so we found a managing partner for our software company, and we moved ourselves over. And we just started to grow that company and scale it, and then after selling that one, I went back to the software development company. That was being run by my other business partner. And then she and I decided, okay, we're gonna try this whole literacy thing, this whole education technology.
Let's do it. Yeah. And did you keep Norex going?
Yeah. That was run by a managing partner.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And then you went over and founded, and it's called Shoelace.
Shoelace, yeah. It was originally called iRead.
Yeah, that's how I knew it.
Yeah, we were using the eye tracking technology, so we thought that was a pretty cool name, and we just rebranded. So jumping ahead a little bit, and we can jump back. But in 2016, we launched our first product, but I was frustrated at the pace of scale of that product because in education, selling to schools and districts is really brutal and horrible. And so in 2019, we shelved that product. We basically just put it online for people to buy, but we got rid of our sales team, our support team. And I said, no, I'm going to build a true product company focused on engineering and marketing. And so we launched a brand new platform in 2019. And that's the one that got rebranded to be Shoelace.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So really, and so much to dive into here. So let's start with you. So Norex is being run by a managing partner.
Right.
You and one of your business partners say, look, we're going to go all in on what was called iRead at the time and on eye tracking. And the first thing that you do is start to spend a ton of time with people. Okay. So let's get kind of into the nitty gritty of that. Who did you spend time with? How long did this go on for? How are you, what did this actually look like? 'Cause sometimes founders need a bit of help at really envisioning. They hear you have to talk to people, but they don't necessarily understand what that means. So I'd love to be very granular about what it looked like for you and like the first, and how, what were did it go on for 30, 60, 90 days? What, take us into it.
Yeah. And that's such a good question, because this is the hardest part of starting a business, right? Like, you don't know how to take it forward. So we had the benefit of having a software development company that was incubating us. So we had access to some of those resources, right? So we created a very, very basic prototype. It looked great. Like, it had a nice interface, and we had a little eye tracker at the bottom, and we got the Halifax Public Libraries to let us come and use it with, just people who were at the library. We had people come to our office and try it with their kids. And basically we were just collecting the eye patterns when kids were reading on the screen. So that's how we did it. You do need something to be asking. I shouldn't even say that, because at the very beginning, we did surveys. We did surveys to parents to understand, what are you concerned about? We hadn't even talked to teachers yet. It was mainly parents. And then from that, we created the very, very basic prototype. We realized really quickly it wasn't going to work.
And how many surveys did you collect to make your first prototype?
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe 50, 100 surveys.
Okay. So it's not like you don't have to do 20,000.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. Ask good questions, and you can get, a group of 20, 40, 50. But I think immediately we could see that we weren't going to be able to use this product, because the idea of calibrating the eyes of kids in an environment that's not a lab is almost impossible. And for your listeners who can't see me, I'm moving around in front of the camera, which is what kids like to do. So we basically said, okay, this isn't going to work. But through the process, we were getting really engaged in helping kids learn how to read. We're like, this is a problem we want to help solve. And so we decided, okay, we're going to create something that's super fun for students. And where this came from, we'd asked Dalhousie if we could work with some of the researchers in the lab to track eye patterns. And we saw that the researchers were building these really bad looking interfaces. And so kids would go to lab and they would use these interfaces and they'd get bored almost immediately. And as a mom, I'm like, guys, we can do so much better. Let's just make this look fun for them. Let's just like
they're used to Dora the Explorer.
Yeah, yes.
They're not dealing with this ragtag exactly.
Super easy. So we knew that was the case. So we had created a whole bunch of awesome interfaces and kids were super engaged. So when we decided to throw out the eye tracker, we thought, what if we just increase engagement? Like, what if we get kids to actually enjoy reading? And let's just try that. And so that was really the first prototype of what we were doing with the product called Squiggle Park. It's like just trying to get kids to be engaged. So we created a little game where they went through a pathway and they had to master their skills to get through. And it turned out to be exceptionally popular with kids. They loved it because the bar was so low in education, frankly. It was just low. So that's how we got it out there. Now, one of the things that we did that I think is helpful for new entrepreneurs was we entered ourselves in something called the Global Learning X Prize. It was a big global education competition, free to enter, and anybody got accepted, but nobody knew that. So we would lead with, hey, we're a part of the Global Learning X Prize. And people would be like, wow, that's incredible. And we had so many people who would actually open their doors and speak to us because of that. And then, so once we got it a bit of a prototype that was working, we decided, okay, this is really it. We're going to really go for this. And we built the product out. And that's when I was spending, hundreds of hours in the classroom at that point.
Interesting. And how big was your team at this time?
I think the biggest we got in these early days was about 4.
Okay.
It was like 2 technical people and then my business partner and I.
Yeah. Wow. What I find so fascinating about this is that you practiced, in writing, we call it killing your darlings.
Okay.
So that sometimes in order to make a piece great, there's this part of it. Maybe it's a sentence, maybe it's a, that you just think is the best part, but you actually have to get rid of it in order to make the story work effectively. And so you go into it with huge amounts of investment and sunk cost into tracking eye patterns. And that's ultimately what you have to, that's ultimately what you had to kill in order to be able to solve the bigger problem. How was that a difficult decision to abandon that particular approach?
I don't think so. Like, I think it was pretty clear that there wasn't a good business model. Like, there was just no way we were going to be able to sell this to customers. And yeah, so, early on we made that decision. And I think that's a mistake that can be made often is just continuing to move forward without really understanding what your model is, how you're actually going to sell it. I think it was a pretty easy decision to make for us.
Now, you actually did make a decision, a shift in how you sold things. So 2016, you are launching, it was that Squiggle Park that you were launching?
Squiggle Park we launched in 2016, that's right. Cool.
So great product, the kids are engaged, and you're frustrated because it's not moving as quickly as you want. You're trying to sell into schools. Like, what was the problem, and what's the transferable lesson that you take from that?
Yeah, the problem was the user who loved it was the teacher. They were not the purchaser. It was purchased by the school or the district, who was either 1, 2, or 10 steps removed from the teacher's experience in the classroom. So there was no kind of emotional pull to buy your product. You were just one of many vendors, and you had to go through a multi-year sales process, tons of bureaucracy, tons of red tape. So that part was frustrating to me because I'd be talking to teachers and we had a product that worked. It helped kids master early reading. And I'd be talking to teachers just saying, please, is there any way I can get a license? And I'd just be like, oh, we'll just give it to you. Don't worry. Cause how can you not? Right.
Yeah.
And, I remember one time I was driving home from work and I had a teacher call me in tears, a user down in the States. And she had been teaching a student who was nonverbal, non-responsive with autism in her classroom, and really was feeling like she was getting nowhere. And this was like 6 months into the school year, she'd been working on this for a long time. And she started using Squiggle Park, and she said it was amazing because this child actually started answering the questions using the mouse. So he actually understood and he was answering them correctly. And for the first time, she was getting a response. And not only that, she could see that he had been learning, and she was just in tears. And for me, that was just like, this is so incredible. But the model, again, is broken. Like, the fact that I can't get this into the hands of every teacher and build a sustainable business is wrong. So that was, geez, talk about killing a darling. Yeah. We loved that product. We loved it. And we wanted it to still be available. That's why we left it online to purchase, but we were never going to be able to scale at the rate we really thought was possible. So that's, yeah.
How did you, and what information did you receive, or what happened such that you made the decision? Because I'm sure, 3 years you're trying, it's not working. Often there's a multiple losses that are happening, not winning this deal, not getting this. Like, what made you actually decide to pull the trigger and cut, and move it to, something they could purchase off the shelf, but just, this is it, we're moving on?
Yeah. Well, we couldn't grow the team at the pace that we needed to grow revenue aggressively. So we were seeing really slow growth, extremely slow growth, only a few $100,000 in revenue every year. And that just, it didn't allow us to grow a massive sales team, which is what we needed to really, to grow the company. And so we sat down and we said, well, what if we do it differently? And we just built it. We just, opened up an Excel file, and I should say Google Sheet, because it's probably, that's what it was. Yeah. And we built out a new model saying, like, what if we gave it for free to everybody, and then we converted a certain number of users? What would we need to do to have something that scaled, and how does it look? So we just built a model, like, not too hard. I don't think it took us more than a couple of hours, and it looked really attractive. Like, holy smokes, we could do something great here if we build the right product. And And so I think it was really kind of seeing that opportunity at the same time as, seeing just how the other business model was just too slow to be effective. And so, but that was tough. Like, it was really tough because it was saying, okay, no longer, we're going to see declining revenue with this other product, which is the one that's holding the company up right now. And we're going to go completely cold to a whole new model, build brand new platform. And, so that was a big leap of faith.
Yeah.
And we had some investors at that point, just friends and family, but it was like, we got a lot of pushback. Like, what are you guys doing? This is crazy.
What was the most important, skill that you needed to cultivate in your own inner ecology to make that move, to handle the pushback, to, make a really bold shift?
I think just like do the work. Like, do the work. Don't cut corners. Like, if you really want to try something, be able to back it up with the why behind it, why it makes sense, and really like stress test it, right? Mm-hmm. Does it make sense from your vision perspective and from a business model perspective and from a go-to-market perspective? And, people say do the lean canvas, but like there's a bit of rigor to actually doing that with some depth and it takes work. But, I had learned not to cut corners in my life. In fact, like back to the Olympic experience, when I was on the line the day that we were racing the final, the thing that I remembered was when I was running around Lake Bannock, which we did often, there was one corner that everybody cut. And I would say to myself, no, I'm going to run right to the end and across. And that was the thing I thought about on the line, like this like psychological game with myself, right?
Yeah.
But do the work. And then you have the confidence to move forward with it, because people see through you if you don't have the confidence really quickly. So
it's very true. And preparation does build a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
It really does. So 2019, you shelve Squiggle Park. What do you, and out of a spreadsheet emerges a powerful vision for a new direction. Tell us about what that new direction ultimately was.
Okay. So this was something that we built in about 3 months. Like, we knew we had to get it out quick. So we had a team in place. We had some revenue.
To keep the company going.
Right. So we had to get something out quick. And it had to be relatively not full featured, but it had to be good enough that people would buy it. We had to be able to test whether it would work. People would put their money on it. And so we knew that game-based learning was working, but Squiggle Park wasn't as fun as we thought it could be. And so we wanted to do better. We wanted to up our game. And so this game was going to be more fun. It was going to actually mimic a true video game. And we were going to expand our market. So where Squiggle Park was early reading, this one goes up to grade 8. And the model would change. So the model would be freemium, just like video games, where you can play for free. And then if you want to, you can buy assets in the game or buy a subscription. So we were thinking to ourselves that we could just mimic the video game model if we could create a game that was truly fun for kids. And so we built something. I remember we released it in October of 2019. And again, back to this whole global Learning X Prize thing. We entered it into a contest in January of 2020, and we won a big U.S. national competition for most innovative new edtech platform, and that gave us a boost.
Come on, yeah,
and we got to a couple, like 2 million users within the first couple of years without any investment in marketing, zero. And
that's
I don't
a sign of what you were talking about before.
That
the market's pulling the product.
Yeah. That's the pull. Like, we weren't pushing it. They loved it. They were telling their peers, and it was being pulled. And I can't say the model was perfect. There was a lot to work out, and there's a lot we're still working out. But that was a sign of real traction that you can build on, right? Like, this is something I really want to invest in. Yeah.
I have a question, which is about drive, because when we look at, your career and your evolution, so elite athlete, founding even, Queen Street Studios, which was not your most successful venture, but was still an ambitious visionary venture. Norex, Sheepdog, Squiggle Park, Shoelace, you know, how do you define drive, and what is your relationship to drive?
I think when it comes to drive for me, it goes back to that resilience again, right? Like drive for me is just this constant desire to push further. And you know what? It's not a great thing all the time. Like there's a part of me that wishes I was a little bit more balanced, because I'm like I'm an 11 or 1 on the scale all the time. And so but it's this constant desire to do better, to try to solve problems that haven't been solved. And frankly, I've had the benefit of having lots of really diverse experiences in my life. And so where I think I bring value is in connecting the dots, like systems thinking, bringing pieces together that haven't been brought together before. And that drives me, because innovation is so exciting. The opportunity to do something new is so exciting. And then, winning. Yeah. Winning drives me. I like the idea of the chance to win and putting yourself out there with an opportunity to win. So those are all things that, that I kind of equate to drive. But it's a blessing and a curse.
Well, and it's interesting, as you're talking it through, I realize that for you in particular, there is this connection between drive and innovation, this idea to pull ideas together, to keep solving, more and more interesting and unique problems, which I really relate to that. What would you say is a habit? Like if you were to teach a course on innovation, what would be some of the core things that you would want to cover in that course? What would be some of the core habits that you would want your students to learn in order to become more innovative?
Yeah. Okay. So 2 kind of more kind of out there ideas, and then 2 really grounded ideas. So, and I think they have to work together with innovation. The first is being untethered. So people think of that as a negative. There's a negative connotation to untethered, but it's one of our company values. And it came from Willie Nelson. He has the Tao of Willie. And he was interviewed at one point, and the interviewer asked him, did you set goals for yourself? And he said, no. Had I set goals for myself, I never would have actualized the level of success I actually reached. And that hit me hard, because I was thinking we put limits on ourselves based on what we think is possible today. So I encourage everyone on my team to live untethered. We don't know the possibilities that are going to come out tomorrow. We don't know ChatGPT is going to be released. Yeah. So open your mind to anything, and be ready to push that forward, and we'll find ways to get there. Technology can do almost anything. We'll find ways, but untether your mind from what's possible today. And that's hard for people.
Especially because it's also around, sometimes even when you set goals, a goal can be a tethering thing. Right. Rather than an invitation. So that's fascinating. Okay. Second thing.
It's mind shifting, right?
Yeah, very.
We're always taught to have goals, and I see the value, but what if you can go so much further, right? So untethered is important, especially in innovation. The other piece is ease with uncertainty. We never know exactly where we're going, what we're doing. We just don't, because we're an innovation company, right? There's just no way we can know exactly what the outcome will be. So we have to be okay with not having the answers all the time, which can be a frustrating feeling. But you have to kind of sit in it and live in it and be okay, and just have a faith that you've built the right team with the right people. You have the right vision, that you will get there. But ease with uncertainty is something you need to have within innovation. The grounded things are, you can't have innovation in chaos. You need discipline. So you really need a series of processes in your organization that encourage really strong communication, check-ins, and, understanding what to prioritize, and people have roadmaps, and you really need the discipline. It can't just be everybody's kind of thinking big thoughts all the time. You also have to have a really good sense of vision, but you have to be working in the moment. You can't be working at that vision level. You need to be delivering today on a roadmap that kind of steps you there. So that's it. And then I guess I'd go back to this idea, do the work, right? It's not going to happen for you. You got to make it happen. And then if I could wrap kind of all of that around, wrap something around all of that, it would be, get the best people at the table, build a team that's world-class. And I think we undershoot that sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's such a thread in your conversation. How have you done that as, like, yes, you've been a funded startup, but that doesn't mean you've had unlimited funding. You know, like, what is your secret to hiring the best talent you can, building the best team that you can, without Goldman Sachs money?
It is the vision. As the CEO of an innovative company, you need to know your story, but it's not a story. It's a deep seated belief. And then you have to tell it. And if people believe it, they will join you and they'll stay with you and they'll give everything to help make that happen because they believe it too. What we're building right now is not just game-based learning. We're building a platform that's teaching kids how to think critically because we've broadened their thinking with different points of view, which is a big problem these days with kids who are getting narrowed points of view. That's our vision is a future with generations of learners who have broadened thinking to change the world. There's a story behind that people have connected to, and they've joined our team because they see an opportunity that's so much bigger than just building the next widget, right? Which, some people want to do. But in my case, purpose-led individuals who think big really want to be a part of this.
And I've heard you describe, when asked to how you define yourself, I've heard you say that one of the first ways that you define yourself is as a mother.
Yeah. I was scared. I was like, where are you going?
Yeah, I know.
What have I said?
Good. I did it 2 times. Awesome. So as a mom, you have 4 kids. What's the age difference between the oldest and the youngest?
My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 8.
So when we think about doing the work, and we also think about the realities of being a parent, raising kids, and how that just the realities that it takes time, both like running a business, having a meaningful career, raising a family, all of them take time. Mm-hmm. What have you learned about being a person capable of having all those things?
That it requires patience with yourself and a little bit of being kind to yourself, and not feeling guilty. I spent years feeling guilty that I wasn't there for my kids. And it was so much time lost because my oldest son is at Acadia now university, and he was in a business class and they popped up our logo on the screen. They were going to study our company, and he's like, wait a minute. And then the next slide was my picture, and he's like, hey, that's my mom. And he texted me from class, and he's like, Mom, look. And he had taken a picture, and he was like, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, it's amazing because for all those moments I couldn't be there where other parents might have been there, he's having a moment where he can pull that all together and be proud of what I've achieved and really kind of try to follow in that with that same drive and the aspiration for himself. But the other piece, which is just a reality for some, maybe not others, is a really good partner in my life. I have an excellent partner so I definitely don't do it on my own. And then again, discipline with myself. So making sure that I'm exercising, sleeping really well. I'm ridiculous with sleep. I go to bed at like 8 every night. And then, and then, meditation, those types of things, whatever you need to keep that balance. And I get better as I get older with that. Like it was way harder when I was younger.
Yeah. Julia Rivard Dexter, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun.